Bene, buongiorno, buongiorno a tutti.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Pascal Sombico. I am show officer and sales manager of Zoomark International, and I'm very happy to welcome you on behalf of Bologna Fiera, Zoomark. There are many of you linked into this second event, looking at the market, and to go into the whole questions and themes that might be of interest to the industry. And also I see that there are many participants who come from abroad. And that is something that we're very happy with, because it means that the subjects that we are talking about are also international subjects. The interest that we are seeing for these meetings is the sort of interest that is shown by the success that Zoomark is having, as you probably know, thanks to the very numerous companies that are still today booking booths for Zoomark. In fact, we have been able to fill and add 2 halls to our configuration, and therefore we, in fact, can't wait to, welcome all the exhibitors from 50 countries. So we'll meet finally in person in a safe environment without having to worry about health issues, to give rise to an event that will certainly be full of opportunities for going into business and exchange and having a good business meeting. So now I'd like to give the floor to Patrick Fontana, who is our editor-in-chief of Pet Trend and also our moderator, and he's going to conduct us through the subjects of today. And I also give you we'll meet again at our next webinar in May, and then we're going to hopefully meet again at Zoomark in 15th to 17th of May, where there'll be many meetings, roundtables of great interest. So I'd like to give the floor to our moderator, Patrick Fontana. Thank you very much. Welcome to everybody to this second webinar introducing Zoomark International. And in May, we're going to have a look at the market with the presentation of the report on data. Today, however, we're going to look at a theme with regard to the commercial scenario, and especially the very fast rise of large-scale retailers selling pet products. And we're going to look at the various assortment of products that we're seeing. As we have just said, it's a very fast increase in the amount of products that are being offered. So we'd like to thank all the people who are taking the floor. Eduardo Lano from Morano, and he will be looking at pet food. Dan Franco, president of Rinaldo Franco, and he will be telling us something with regard to accessories and snacks and treats, again for pets. And then we have 2 retailers, Vincenzo Francioso, who is in charge of concept at the Pezzo Conad, and Marco Cantombolesi, who is category manager of Salex's Animalic Passione. Now, Conad and Salex, in a parallel way, represent the first 2 groups of large retailers in Italy. And they're the 2 groups that are consolidating most rapidly their market coverage in standalone stores around Italy, specializing in pet products. So we have people who really know about the market talking to us today. Now, before we go into the question of products and distribution, I'd like to give the floor to Samantha Correale, who is Business Intelligence Senior Manager of just one Osservatorio Immagine, and which is a survey. They, first of all, were barcode people, but now they have, in fact, become the Imagino survey or observatory, and they look at the communication on packaging and on labels to look and see what the trends are and what the products are on the shelf and what the communication to the consumer is. Samantha Correale is going to talk about certain macro trends which come from her survey, the Imagino Observatory. So I'd like to give the floor to her right off. Thank you very much. Thank you, Patrick. And I'd like to thank Zoomark International and Bologna Fiera for having given us this opportunity to share with you the data that we are collecting today, thanks to this survey called Osservatorio Immagino. Now, I've got some slides to help me get the message across. But I'm having trouble sharing, but here I go. Now, as we said, and as Patrick has said already, Italy has been looking at this survey, this what we call observatory, and it's something which we've had for 6 years. And over these 6 years, we have developed a whole series of information that come from the digitalization of large consumer product labels. So we're talking about large-scale retailing, and we've analyzed the information on the labels and on the packaging to try and identify the complementary trends and where consumers are putting their trust and what's happening on the market. Now, obviously, the traditional method of looking at product categories still holds good, of course, but looking at the digitalization of the information on products and on labels, this particular approach allows us to look at trends and to see the various variables on the various products, and regardless of their category, or to see the differences within the same category. Now, let's have a look and see the sort of products that we have digitalized. We're talking about 133,000 products that are digitalized within our service called Immagino, and we have 2,000 producers and 59 retailers that belong to our network. Now, this enormous number of digitalized products covers 82.3% of the total products sold in hypermarket supermarkets. And we're talking about more than 100 variables found on the labels. And all this information, if you like, quantitative information, is linked to other data on sales. And we are linked in with Nielsen IQ, and we put together and we read all the data combined, and the scanner sales and the consumer data for hypermarkets and supermarkets. Now, all this information allows us to look at new phenomena as they come up, new consumer behavioral patterns. Now, when we talk about variables, what we're talking about? We're talking about the description of the product, the allergens, the additives, nutritional information, ingredients, preservation, and origin, and all the claims that we call marketing claims. In other words, the things that are decided strategically to present on the product packaging. Now, what happens? What's happening? The mix of all this information every 6 months is analyzed, and we pick up the consumer phenomena which are across the board and also regional. And in fact, we have developed certain clusters of products to which we have attributed certain names. For example, groups of products which for us can be categorized as free from. For example, here we're talking about all the products that don't have something in them, free from fat, sugar, GMO, or whatever. And then we have another cluster, which is in fact all the rich in products, products that in fact are enriched with fibers, vitamins, and so on and so forth. So we then have the cluster of what we call Italianità, specific Italian produce. That's very important for Italy. And there are a lot of products in this typical Italian product. Many claims which say 100% Italian, or they have the Italian flag on it, or produced in Italy, and so on. That's another cluster. So this is the scenario where we looked at a specific market category called pet products, which is something which is very much coming to the fore in the retailer sector. We realized that all these consumer phenomena that I mentioned before are transferred to pet food products as well. And we see the same sort of indications in the packaging of pet food products. We see, for example, very readily products that can be aggregated into the free from label, all Italian label, lifestyle, rich in, and so on. And this has allowed us to assess things more quantitatively and see, for example, how these phenomena are faring, both in terms of the offering put out on the market and how the producers are exploiting these possibilities of making these claims on the package, and to see the reaction of the consumer. In other words, what the customer buys at the end of the day. Let's give you some numbers. What are we actually talking about? We're talking about 4,500 pet food or pet products in general. And then we, in fact, have restricted this to cat and dog products, and it's a little bit more than 3,000 if we just look at cat and dog products. Now, we see the prevalent categories. The prevalent world is free from, and then followed by rich in, and then very Italian products. That's almost 500, as you can see. What you can see in the line are the trends year on year. The trends are all positive, and there's one trend that is very dynamic, which is for very Italian products. Now, behind the free from rich in categories, obviously there are specific claims that are made. And that means the composition, the mix of the various categories that are publicized. Let's talk about free from, and you can see the number of products. And in the dog and food, pet food, that is almost 57% of the sales. And it's very important. And in fact, June 2021, there's been a 2.8 increase. And the claims are different. What usually is the claim that seems to produce the best results is the claim linked to the low presence or absence within the product of grain. So it's low grain, free from grain, of cereals, carbohydrates. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word. Thank you, Bartek. Carbohydrates. So that's the biggest category, but other claims like sugar-free, low categories or no MGOs, GMOs, and we see that these are, again, claims which are very positive and picked up on. Now, rich in, again, for dog and cat pet food, we see there are 450 million in sales. That's about 59% of all revenue from sales. And the trend is an increase of 1%. So positive. And here we have many different types of claims for the rich in pet food, cat and dog. Natural ingredients, that's one of the most important claims for the consumer, prebiotics or omega-3 and 6 vitamins, proteins, minerals, and so on. Some are doing well, some are doing less well. What we have noticed is that there are similarities in the trends of these claims and the same claims within common products for humans. There's a sort of transposition, in other words, or attention on the part of the consumer that picks up on the claims for human consumption, products for human consumption, and then expresses the same preference with regard to products for animals, for their pets. Now, what's happened to typical Italian products? Now, typical Italian products, or the claim, is very much what we saw before. There are, in fact, fewer products, as I did before, a little bit less than 500, with 56 millions worth in sales, and that means 7.3% of all sales. But the trend is an increase of 17.7%. And that's a cluster which is showing the greatest dynamism within pet foods. And this is due, as I said, to the real interest that consumers are showing for typical Italian or Italian-made products. Everything that talks about made in Italy or with some Italian characteristic. In fact, if you look at the composition of this trend, we see how, in fact, it is a result of a very good mix on the part of the offering, and companies are emphasizing this sort of a product, but on the other hand, they are meeting very much a customer demand. So this enormous rise is the result of the offering supply meeting demand and vice versa. And now the last type of information that I'd like to talk about more fully, and which is receiving consumers' attention, is the whole issue of sustainability. In our survey, in our observatory, we have obviously segmented this because sustainability is a very broad subject. So we had to divide this up into several areas. Here you see several here, 3. And these are the ones, these 3 that we have seen most frequently mentioned in pet food. And sustainable management of resources is one, and that refers to biodegradability, the compostability, or the recyclability of the packaging. And then we have the other category, which is sustainable agriculture or animal husbandry. In other words, the traceability of along the supply chain. That is very important. That is of great interest to the consumer. And I confirm here too that this is a trend which is growing. Again, this is also seen as a major interest in products for human consumption. And then the third category is animal welfare, respecting animals. And this is a claim that is very important as well, no cruelty and so on. And this is something which the consumer has great interest in, both in pet food and in products for human consumption. Now, with this, having concluded our results of the survey, things that I think should be monitored and looked at. Obviously, this is only a summary, and I invite you to download our survey, our observatory, both in pet food, and it's observatory number 10. We've got to 12, in fact, but you can have access free and download free of charge all the previous editions of our observatory. It's, of course, provides a lot more data than I was able to give you now. I have a couple of technical problems, but I hope you can hear me. Anyway, thank you very much, Samantha Coriale. I'd like to thank GS1 Italy for us journalists who are looking and have been looking into consumption phenomena for many years. Our lives have changed since this survey observatory came into being, because it allows us to be very much more precise, not only on retail and sales, but for other things. Certain more subtle indications are very important, and sales are not necessarily the acid test. Being able to look at phenomena, what is happening to products on the shelf, and what is happening also for the or within the producer, on the producer's side, and what producers and retailers want to indicate to consumers gives us a much wider idea, an in-depth view as what's happening on the market. Now, at this point, I'd like to involve the first of our guests, Eduardo Mano, the commercial director of Morando, and involve him in, of course, a specific area. Of course, retailers are specializing, and they have brought in many stores. And it's something which, in fact, where we have seen an increase in market coverage, many square meters being added all the time. So there should be greater possibility for innovation with this larger number of stores. And I'd like to ask the representative of Morando, going back to what Samantha Coriano said, we saw the importance of Italian products. I mean, you have a company that, in fact, is something which your company is very strong on. But what about innovation? I mean, there are many ways that you can bring in innovation in pet food, and probably no company can follow them all. But in terms of your R&D, what choices have you made in terms of innovation, and why have you made these choices and not others? Can you put on your mic? I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, welcome everybody. Perhaps innovation would require a roundtable of several days, but for us, innovation is a topic which is very dear to us because it brings value, it brings growth. But when we talk about innovation, we talk in terms of new product concepts, new brands, and new types of products which we will put on the shelf. But also, we don't neglect the whole question of the existing products, and therefore we want to improve the existing products. And we have products to improve the recipes, to improve the packaging of existing products. All those things are part of our innovation. Innovation also must always be well articulated and well divided up and be part of the architecture and the availability of our brands. We have a brand which is very wide for dog food, etc. We have several tiers of accessible price products, but also we have in fact developed high brands like Miglior Gatto, Miglior Cane, and we have protein-specific products for animals, and this is a brand for in the premium tier, which today is in fact something that brings in considerable revenue. Can I ask you a question vis-a-vis what something was said by Samantha? She saw that there was a link in with what was happening in food for human consumption and what was happening in terms of pet food. I mean, do you take inspiration from what's happening in the food for human consumption, or do the two things go in parallel? Or do you pass on from what you know in human food to pet food? Or is it something which just happens by chance? Well, the process, if you like, is full immersion always. As we know, we've seen that the pet food market and pets have become humanized in the last few years. And pets, in fact, were pets, and now they have been called in Italian animals for which we have a great deal of affection, and now they've become members of the family. So we've seen this transfer and this humanization of animals and pets. Spotify, for example, is developing compilations for animals that are left alone at home, music that they like, for example, looking after the animal when the pet owner is away. And we see we've seen an explosion of this sort of interest also in Italy. And in fact, we see that animals are now being taken out when you go to a cocktail or dinner or on holiday, and the animal in fact also has a therapeutic result and psychological benefit for humans. We know that animals help to reduce stress in human beings. So having an animal, being a pet parent, means having another member of your family, and it helps us to live better. But when you pinpoint a new product, thanks to this awareness and this new process that you've realized, are you frightened of being a little bit exaggerated? Well, we launched a new super pet food line, which picked up on this phenomenon of the super pets, the humanization phenomenon, and we launched a line which is having very good success with ingredients that can be classed as superfoods. Curcuma, pineapple, and rose thistle and so on. So we definitely see this transposition and this transposing of human ingredients into pet food. That definitely we are seeing, but not always does the market pick this up. It's seen as a big innovation, but sales perhaps at times are not as high as we might expect. We accept that certainly humanization of animals is underway, but we also say that the animal has certain nutritional needs and has to have a balanced diet, which is specific to those animals. And this we keep clear in our minds. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to involve Vincenzo Francioso, in the discussion. You are the person in charge of concept at the pet store Conard Pet Store. Everybody thinks of Conard, the supermarket, as new people, sort of new actors and players on the market that have arrived recently. So on the pet store shelves, what about your innovative products and new entries? And what about hyper-segmentation of products? What role does that have? And also, what differences do you see in terms of your traditional shops? Well, good afternoon, everybody. Now, let me say one thing. Conrad, the Zoomark, as you said, is a chain of specialist traditional stores. The thousands of stores that we have in Italy. I say that because it's very important to our character, because there are a few characteristics, in fact, that a specialist shop has to have. And of them, of course, the most important one, and the most important thing is your staff, and then innovation. These two are very important because innovation is the driver of any specialist store. Without innovation, this market would not have had the success that it's had in the last 25, 26 years, where I've been on the market. And specialization is something which depends very much on the personnel and your staff. The innovation has to be explained well by people that are in the store. Now, when you prepared this meeting, you underlined that you were highly satisfied with the producers and the industry and what the producers are bringing onto the market. Could you explain to us a little bit why you're satisfied and for what? Well, I think that we have Italian industry, which is really excellent, not only excellent in other areas, but especially in pet food. We have many innovators among the producers. So certainly they are doing very well and they're very innovative. In general, Italian producers are very innovative. We have companies that are truly innovative. As I say, compared to the shelves of our general retailers, let's say that the general retailers, in fact, take up on innovation and innovative products that come from specialist stores. This happens in all categories, in sports shops, in DIY, innovative products that come from the specialist area and is taken up by the general retailer. And I think that especially the innovators are really good, especially in Italy. Now, listening to Morando, we learned that they have a greater possibility and range of choice. Now, looking at all the innovations that are coming onto the market in terms of food, a specialist store has to look at them all. And what about your choices? And how do you digest this complexity of the wide innovation? Well, we're very careful to market data, to trends that we pick up, which, of course, are given to us by specialist surveys. We have also the added input of partners who are entrepreneurs and keep their ear to the ground and can tell us what's happening. Unlike other retailers, we have direct contact with our customers and our client because we have an entrepreneur, a partner who talks to us directly. And that means that we can pick up on customer requirements and new things. And that means that we can, in fact, meet the requirements. So we have followed the trends, and we have almost 15,000 articles made available um, to our partners. Usually, every store has 5,500, but were there a need to broaden the range, they have 7,000, 8,000 more products to choose from. And that is something which is really a sure thing. But when you go into a specialist store, be this a hardware or a pet store, you have to come away satisfied as a customer for the consultancy you have received as well as for the products. Now, I was rather surprised that something that isn't immediately perceptible, i.e., working in this particular specialization, in fact, leads to certain criticalities in terms of private label. In fact, it's not that easy to take a private label in this sort of product onto the shelf. What are the criticalities for a private label? I mean, eliminating the technical issues of production, which you don't have, in fact, in our case. But let me say, I think we have to be careful about private label. We're very good at Comrade, not necessarily pet store Comrade, but as Comrade, we're very good at private label because and we have proved this. Now, what's happened in our sector and what we have seen talking with other retailers, you mustn't exaggerate. Italy wants, and the Italian consumer, in fact, wants the industrial brand. Italy is long and thin, and the private label is a something which is very much requested, but also the industrial brand is equally important to offer a single brand store. In other words, is not a good indication. You have to have both. Now, can we expect that your specialist network is going to increase at the same pace that we saw in 22? Yes, our concept was highly successful. Like all things, it took some time to get digested and to be assimilated because, again, we have partners who are directly involved and have to invest. But the move was really very positive. We met a need that families felt, the families who came to the supermarket and express this need. So, in fact, we then took this and, in fact, specialized across the board in our choice and specialization of the personnel and staff as well. So we foresee that we're going to, in fact, open as many stores as we did in 2022, in other words, 30. Now, let me go back to we have heard from Vincenzo Fancioso the importance of Italian products and so on. Let me go back to Eduardo Lano. And what about export? I mean, what are you doing abroad? Can you tell us something about your activity abroad? Well, for us, export is the second most important channel after retailing. It's 16% of our turnover. We're in 62 countries in the world, and it's an area which is growing considerably. And we use our brands, and we have very long-term relations with our consumers and with our clients in the Balkans, for example, and in Greece. This year, had we had the production capability in the large format and dry food products, had we had this possibility, we would have been able to pick up many business opportunities. And we want, however, to continue to grow, but do this in a rather more comfortable way, trying to push our brands and to focus a bit more on the premium tier products of our range of products. But certainly it is a market where we really have a lot of demand. Having to say no to our customers is a great displeasure, but we had to, unfortunately. Thank you very much. Thank you to both of you. I'd like to, in fact, look at the next Zoomark. And will there be a showcase for the new products of tomorrow? Will there be a special showcase in the new Zoomark? Yes, certainly there will be, because a trade show, of course, is the place to launch new products, because that way you have coming together the whole of the business community, and it's a first way of getting a taste of what the reaction is of services, of products, and other innovations. Obviously, the aim of Zoomark is to enhance and to give as much visibility to new products presented by producers. We have a whole area which will underline the market trends as well. And this area is called Pet Vision, and has been conceived as a sort of journey learning and looking into the research conducted into the trends that will characterize the market and the dynamic of the market in coming months and years. Now, this area will have at least 500 innovative products, and to be able to be accepted in this area, it has to have specific characteristics, and also it will be visible a couple of weeks before on our website as well. So there'll be a preview, and in fact, the visitors will be able to select products they're interested in, and that will allow them to organize their business meetings and perhaps make appointments with the particular companies they're interested in with regard to a new product. And this year at Pet Vision, we also are going to have a contest. We're going to have a jury of journalists, experts, and sector operators, both Italian and international operators, and the jury will select the best products entered, innovative products, and they will select those products that have the most important products, both in terms of innovation, but also in terms of sustainability and technological content and so on. In other words, the products that are emblematic of these new trends. So certainly, Zoomark will be a very interesting tool to find out what's happening and what's new on the market and what the future prospects are for the market. It is a key tool to be able to decide on the future strategies. Now, I'd like to give the floor to Marco Tombolesi. Now, I'd like to go back to something that was mentioned by Vincenzo Francioso of Conad. In your specialist network, you have presented this innovative ideas, and you've seen how your various partners have reacted. In the world of Selex, with the brand or the section called Animali che Passione, do you see again a further acceleration as you've had before, similar to what you did in 2022? Yes, we have a format in Selex, which is a format which in fact has been accepted and taken on board by our partners for 2023. Indeed, we'll probably be even stronger in our innovations and in our market coverage compared to 2022. Now, and we are thinking about how to make things operational. So we expect to have a growth which is as strong as last year. So as a concept manager, can you talk a bit about how you choose among all this myriad new products which are presented to you for possibly being sold in on your cells? So what do you do to ensure that the customer can pick up on all the suggestions and offerings that come from the producers? Well, we receive a whole series of input from ad hoc research studies that we commission, and we carry out a first screening of what we consider to be the most valid proposals, both food and non-food products. Very often we compare them with the feedback of our partners and associates. We have focus groups, we have conversations with our consumers. We listen and look at the social network communications. Feedback, therefore, is all important. And then we bring together this information and we pull out of it the possible proposals that seem to align with what we're hearing on the market. We therefore have certain steps which are taken, and we can make certain attempts which might not be very positive in terms of sales, but we give it a try. But the possibility of engaging people and being ahead of the market, it does allow us to be really proactive and also create customer loyalty. And we link into the people who are really interested in the welfare of their pets. Now, when you talk about the food category of products or accessories or snacks, so-called support products for a pet requirement or a pet parent. Now, obviously, the food product is highly specialized, and it makes up about 80% of our sales, and the rest is accessories and treats and so on. We are very careful here because, of course, the risks are greater. The fact that accessories are, if you like, less important than food means that we have to be very careful, and perhaps there's less inducement to bring in new products. But recently, we are seeing a great deal of acceptance of non-food products. which in fact we saw in the research before. For example, second life products or recycled products are really seeing being a great success. And that means that we are making choices as a result of this, and we are responding to the sentiment of customers in terms of this sort of product or accessories. Now, can in fact the new products be linked to the services that you offer in your specialist stores? Are you satisfied, in other words, with what you've been able to set up in terms of the services offered? Yes, we're satisfied, but we still have a long way to go. And especially the services at the sales point certainly enriches the shopper experience, and that's very important for some categories. Increasingly, a shopper wants to have a sort of one-stop shop. In other words, the shopper wants to have a consultancy, wants to get answers from professionals. I mean, I'm not talking about a veterinary, but somebody who is aware of the customer's needs and is aware of animals' needs. And where we have, in fact, this service offered, or where we also have other services, for example, grooming and so on, we definitely see that we have a component which completes the store and also increases the loyalty of those people coming in. And it helps also to create a more across-the-board expertise and competence among the staff at the particular store. Now, let me go and involve Gianfranco, Rinaldo. Now, Rinaldo is the specialist in accessories. We know that the survey, in fact, looks more at food products rather than non-food products. So let's ask you, Gianfranco, from Rinaldo, what's happening in the non-food, the accessories. What about the phenomenon of humanization that we've talked of before, especially in the way that food is presented and bought for pets? Is the same sort of humanization happening in the field of accessories? Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. The answer is yes. Humanization is seen also in the proposals of the producers of accessories. This is a trend which in the last 10 years has in fact got it considerably important. But to go back to what we saw at the beginning of the webinar, the world of accessories is, as you said, a little bit neglected in the research studies and in the data published and the data available. If we look at the various monitors, we see that 90% of accessories are sold in the specialist store and only 10% are sold by general retailers, large-scale retailers. So we're talking about thousands of independent specialist stores. And as Vincenzo Francioso said, obviously the pet stores, whether they're owned by the retailer or not, in fact, use the same formula as the specialist does. But what exactly do you mean? In other words, that they have that same role of 90% for pet food and 10%? Well, I think that in fact, this 90% of the non-food market, which was able to be included in the specialist pet store offered by or owned by the retailers. For example, when we talk to the litter, in fact, we see that, and also snacks, in fact, are sold to the tune of 60 or 70, but apart from litter, other things, other accessories, in fact, it's 90-10. For example, I think about food for birds, rodents, and so on. So, in other words, the pet for and the pet stores, which are specialists, and the pet store owned by retailers tend to offer the same. Now, if you look at your company, which has always been very careful about branding, about what they produce,
tutti I protagonisti del
this is
mondo.
something which
Questa specializzazione in atto
you have done in terms of specialization. But when you look at the specialization of the large-scale retailers, the large-scale retailers who have specialized in pet food, given your specialist trends, is this of advantage to you? Have you been encouraged to reconsider your policies? I mean, how has this changed with the specialization of the retailers? That's an interesting question. Clearly, in the field of generalist retailers specialization, I think that we're facing a different sort of situation. We also, there's a possibility of the willingness to take up new products, to also have promotions, orders, and so on. They're much quicker than the traditional store. And also the developing and presentation of shelves. Obviously, managing two important channels like the traditional mass market retailer that's trying to specialize a bit, and all the specialist pet stores, that's a different, if you like, kettle of fish. We have to almost have a double marketing, a dual marketing system. And we have to have certainly two double buyers, and double packaging. And obviously, that means that there is an added burden to the producer supply chain, because you therefore have stocks which differ. And obviously, we have a multiplication in terms of if we have a private label, which we produce for several operators. So we don't have duplication, we have multiplication, in fact. And if we see that we have production in the Far East for many non-food products, and their planning times are completely different. And that's an added question. Planning is all important and requires time, and also quality production is all important. We guarantee it by having somebody on the spot. And this complexity in duplication obviously exists. We can't hide from it. And it does come up against our annual planning. We have to be, it's quite difficult, certain in times of the timeframes that we have had imposed upon us. So it's a hard job. We've almost come to the end of our webinar. I'd like to ask in Zoomark in May, what does this mean, Gianfranco or Gianfranco? How are you going to approach this fair? Well, the trade fairs for us, especially Zoomark, represent knowledge. I mean, not in a philosophical sense, but it allows us to get to know our customers and be able to physically talk with them at our booth. And in fact, there are going to be 4 at Zoomark. So as well as produce the novelties, and there are many that will be presented, and there'll be many surprises, especially the relationship and the exchange that we can have with our customers, and pass on this knowledge of products that then in turn they will have to pass on to their consumers. We know that there's omni-channel customers that they have to deal with. They come informed, they go onto our website as well, and they come well aware and informed that they've got to have somebody at the shop that will be able to support all their questions and to satisfy them. So Zoomark as a point of information and knowledge is certainly important. So I'd like to ask the rest of you, the others of you, what does Zoomark mean for you? I fully go along with what Franco said. Zoomark is the opportunity for us to present a new product line. Indeed, given these data that you are presenting on the part of GS1, and the question of Italian products, sustainable product, packaging, and the short train, and the return to traditional recipes. That's very interesting because certainly this is part of our concept and the new line that we're going to launch at Zoomark. So certainly it is a great opportunity for us. I'd like to thank all the companies that have dedicated an hour of their time to this webinar, to look at the market and to see what's happening. They're always interesting and useful data. And I'd like to thank you all and wish all the people who have tuned in. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Arrivederci.